The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Hoey, even though it says James Herzing on the meeting here. He was kind enough to let us borrow his GoToWebinar account for today. Um, so again, thank you for joining us for today's Fusion 360 webinar on sculpting basics. We're going to give people just a few more minutes to log into the webinar, and then we'll get started. So just probably bear with us for about maybe about 2-3 minutes, and we'll get started. Thanks. So for the people that just joined, we are just waiting for a few more minutes for some more people to join, and then we'll get started. So just bear with us here for another minute, and we'll get today's webinar kicked off. All right. Well, it looks like we've got a few more people that have joined us, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So once again, if you didn't hear my preamble before, my name is Justin Hoey. I'm not James Herzing, like it says in the title screen there. But we are still here to give you guys some sculpting basics and hopefully maybe go into some other areas of sculpting as well. So I'm joined today by Jamie Shear. He is one of our Fusion 360 experts, and he's going to be taking you guys through a few things. But we want this session to be, as helpful as possible for all of you. So if you guys have any questions at all, please, use the question box. If you want to see something again, you have a question, I'll be here on the line answering those questions and also politely interrupting Jamie when something comes up. And then also at the end, we'll also have some time for you guys to ask more questions, and we're happy to demonstrate as many of those questions as we can, given it the time that we have permitted for today. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jamie to get us started. Jamie?
Thanks, Justin, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And again, I'm going to just do a quick introduction. So thank you all for spending some time in your afternoon to talk a little bit about sculpting inside of Fusion 360. As Justin mentioned, my name is Jamie Scherer. I'm a member of the Fusion Street team, which is a group of designers and engineers inside of Autodesk that's focused wholly on helping our new customers like yourselves accelerate the transition to feeling comfortable with Fusion, using it in their processes. Again, really whatever that means, and by putting together content and sessions like this today, we look forward to hopefully helping you, in this case, feel more comfortable or maybe expand over into the sculpting environment inside of Fusion. So I'm going to start off first and foremost by kicking off a poll, and this one is pretty straightforward. And if you look in your go-to webinar panel, you should see a question: can you hear me and can you see my screen? No right or wrong answers, but hopefully it's a yes, because I'm really excited to show you guys some of the stuff that we have to talk about today. So it looks like I got a lot of yeses. I do have one no. I'm going to ask the person who answered no to the question to raise your hand inside of the attendees dialog box. This way we know that it's you, and maybe there's some type of a technical difficulty that we can work out in the meantime.
Yeah, now the question is it that they can't hear you or they can't see your screen?
That is a better distinction.
Yeah.
So if you can raise your hand or jump inside of the questions panel, you should be able to chat with Justin, and he can help you figure that out.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to close that poll and jump over into a second one, because again, I'm curious, just to kind of frame this session, and please use the question panel if you weren't able to hear or see my screen, and Justin will hopefully help you figure that out. So the second question, how proficient are you with sculpting inside of Fusion 360? And again, no right or wrong answers. You might, you might be an expert, you might be better than me, and I wouldn't doubt it. There's a lot of incredible sculpting and T-spline ninjas out there. You might be very proficient, somewhat. Maybe you've never tried it before. So I see a bunch of different answers. It looks like, most people are maybe somewhat familiar. Some haven't used it yet, and at least one of you feel very comfortable, and that's great. So hopefully, for those of you that have just, dabbled into the environment, and certainly for those of you that have never tried it before, I'm going to go right through the basics, hopefully introduce some tools and some techniques that you can use. And for the person on the webinar who feels very comfortable, again, hopefully we'll have some time to answer some of your questions and expand into some other neat workflows and functionality that you can take advantage of. All right, I'm going to close that poll and open up our last one before we get underway. And the last one, just always great to understand, what other softwares do you currently use or have you used in the past? So Rhino, Alias, SolidWorks, other, which might be Inventor or other tools out there in the industry, T-Splines, and were you a customer of the T-Spline functionality that was acquired by Autodesk several years ago? So I see the polls are rolling in. Looks like we have at least a third SolidWorks users, which is fantastic. A couple people that use Rhino. My background is using Rhino and Alias as well. And then I see a lot of others. Maybe that's Pro Engineer, maybe it's Inventor, but either way, great to see that there's a bunch of different expertise on the call today. And with that, I'm going to close that poll. Justin, I'm not sure if you were able to identify the user and maybe get to the bottom of that. Is it safe to move forward?
Yeah, no, I think we're good to move forward. So.
All right, awesome. So let's jump right over into Fusion 360. So again, what I wanted to do today was just step through workflows and the tools that are used inside of the sculpting environment. What you're looking at on the screen right now is the Ember printer from Autodesk. And what I wanted to do in a quick example was take you through how we might sculpt a handle for the top part of this assembly. So a great example would be, I've used the Fusion 360 and the mechanical tools to build this assembly, apply its joints, its motion. Maybe I've done a simulation to test and make sure that it won't fail in the field. But a great example would be customer feedback says, hey, I'd love to be able to carry this thing around. It's a tabletop 3D printer, and I want to be able to move it easily. So what I'm going to do is isolate the top part of this assembly, and let's go ahead and start to sculpt and use T-splines to create the handle. So you'll see I have the top assembly open in this model, and what I want to do is talk a little bit about how we might set up working in the sculpt environment, and first and foremost, how do we get there? So there were a few people that answered that maybe they've never even seen or used the sculpt environment before, and if you look inside of Fusion 360, it's not easily apparent. So quick hot tip, if you want to use the sculpting tools, what you need to do is first create a form. Creating a form will put you into the sculpt environment, and now we have access to a whole set of tools that allow for free-formed design modeling inside of Fusion 360. So again, once I enter into the sculpt environment, now again, you'll see the sculpt is kind of a subset of the model environment. And now I have a collection of tools that allow for quick and easy, curvature continuous design shapes. So looking through the tool set really quickly, I might want to start off with a primitive type shape. Maybe that's a box or a plane, a sphere or a quad ball. Again, another common workflow might be, a quad ball you might use. You can see that it's subdivided into four-sided faces, where a sphere is, I always call this the world globe, right? This kind of has a north and south pole with a star point where those the triangles come together on the top and the bottom. So again, different reasons why you might want to try or access one or the other. And I can also start off with a sketch and extrude, revolve, or sweep a shape, and then use that as the basis to use these subdivisional T-spline workflows. What I want to do for this first example is start off with a cylinder, but before I do that, I'm actually going to import a canvas or an image into this model to give us something to sculpt around. So underneath the insert tool set, you'll see I can attach a canvas into my model. Again, identifying the face that I want it to lay on, and then all I have to do is go ahead and grab my image for the handle grip, and we'll take a look in here at what we can do to start to work with it. So the manipulator inside of Fusion is the tool that hopefully you're all familiar with that allows us to, move and manipulate geometry inside of our unified modeling environment. But now I have the ability to rotate, resize, scale the image that I want to use as the basis for my new handle design. A couple other great tips that you'll see here. Inside of the attached canvas dialog box, I have some settings. I have some options that'll really help when you're using T-splines and you're sculpting inside of this environment. So first would be opacity. By default, it's going to come in at 100%. And this might be something where you might want to scale it down a little bit. It might be easier to model around an image that isn't completely opaque. And another great tip would be turn on the display through option inside of the sculpt environment, and that makes it easy to have geometry coexist and be able to see it and pass through the image that you just added to the scene. You'll see flip, horizontal and vertical, again, as tools that are there to make it easy for you to reorient your image as you're bringing it into your scene. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and place that image, but another key tip or great workflow that you might want to use is I brought in this image, but I have no idea how. So when you look inside of the Canvas folder inside of Fusion Interface, I can easily go ahead and calibrate this canvas, making it a known distance. I might know that this should be 100 millimeters for the handle that I'm working on. And you can see it's very easy for me to go ahead and build that to scale so that now we can go ahead and start sculpting our handle. All right, so as promised, let's go ahead and use the cylinder tool to place a T-spline primitive in this model. You'll see when I insert the cylinder, it automatically gives me a new T-spline body, which I can push, pull, subdivide, and work with. The properties dialog box on the right-hand side is where I might, easily key in that, there's a known size that I want this handle to be. I also know that it should be 50 millimeters because I'm making half of that 100 millimeter handled grip that we placed in there before. And I can also look at things like how many faces I'm using to subdivide the cylinder. So again, you'll see all of that information right here in the dialog box to your right. All right, now that I've placed my cylinder in this model, again, sticking to the basics, let's talk a little bit about what we can do, how we can manipulate a T-spline model inside of the sculpt environment. So there's three different ways or objects, if you will, that we can manipulate inside of the sculpt environment. We can edit a face, we can edit an edge, or we can edit a vertice. And all three of those will give you different results. The way that we most commonly will make edits to edges, faces, and vertices is by using the edit form command. You'll find that right inside of your right-click menu at the 2 o'clock position, or you'll also see that in Modify, drop-down Edit Form, and it's also the top button right on top of the Modify menu. So again, this is one that you'll get really used to using inside of Fusion. So eventually you'll be used to just doing a right-click and dragging up to the 2 o'clock to grab Edit Form. All right, so I mentioned that we can edit faces, edges, and vertices. Let's talk about what we can do to faces, edges, and vertices. So if we look in at this face that I'm editing, the all-familiar triad or manipulator is apparent for me when I'm in the sculpt environment. And there's three things that I can do to an edge, face, or a vertice. I can translate it, right? So think move it by position. And you'll see the arrows represent X, Y, and Z, moving them right along one of those axes. I can also use the inner rectangles that you'll see here to move that kind of planar to an origin plane, X, Y, Z, etc. So again, you'll see it's easy for me to go ahead and make those manipulations. The next thing that I can do is edit an edge, and we'll go back to where I started. I can edit an edge, face, or vertice by scaling it. So, a great example from the inside of the manipulator is dragging on the inner dot that you'll see there. We'll do a uniform scale, and we'll scale my new T-spline body uniformly. I can also use the edges or the corners to scale in the X direction, Y direction, Z direction as well. So again, those scales are there too.
Hey, Jamie, just
Justin, was there?
Yeah, there's just a quick question that came through, and I wanted to do it before you got too far along there.
Great.
The question that came through was, how did you actually isolate down to just this object that you're working on inside that assembly?
So if I understand the question, let me clarify that. Are we looking at how did I isolate just to work on this sculpt body, or how did I isolate to work just on the edge? And that might be a different.
Yeah, so for the subassembly itself, so it looks like you're kind of in that top cabinet subassembly.
Oh, great. Yes, thanks. So if I jump back to the top level assembly, all I did was find the top level assembly in my browser, and I didn't open on it. And I apologize, I did that kind of before we started our session, but it was simple, just an open on that subassembly, which led me into this kind of isolated top assembly.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
You got it. So sorry about that. I did skip a step by already having a couple files open. All right, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of manipulation would be rotation. So I talked about translation, right? Push, pull in, unidirection, or, can move about a plane. I talked about scale. And then if you look at the little circles on the outside of the triad, I always call them the electrons because they look like, they're flying around the outside of my manipulator. That lets me rotate my T-spline body. So again, by dragging on any one of those, you can see I can twist, rotate the face, edge, or vertice around my model. All right, let's get back to the beginning shape that I had here, and we'll continue talking a little bit about how to manipulate, and in this case, how to subdivide our T-spline bodies. So if I look at this T-spline from the side, you'll notice I might not have enough control to make the handle grips on the bottom, right? If I were to pull and use edit form, you'll see I don't have enough faces to add in the grip. So what I'm going to do is inside of the modify menu, use insert edge. An insert edge is a quick and easy way for me to select on an edge, and then you'll see I can subdivide the adjacent faces by inserting these edges. I can easily kind of push and pull and define where those edges should be located. You'll notice I can insert an edge to one side or the other, and I can also do it into a specific location. But I want to split this up on both sides, so now I have better control over making the handle grips on the bottom of my handle. So again, as I'm in edit form, you can see it's easy for me to push and pull and manipulate all of these edges to match the shape of the handle that I'm going for. One really cool little sidebar, you've heard me, and we talked a little bit early on about T-splines, and here's the reason why that technology is called T-splines. You'll see when I divided that face, it actually created a T, a subdivision on the surface faces. And again, that's a very unique algorithm. It was an acquisition that Autodesk made several years ago that allows us inside of this environment to not only manipulate and sculpt these curvature continuous faces, but we can calculate and even figure out subdivisions that enter into a T, as opposed to them always having to be, one-to-one and continuous around my model. So quick sidebar, and important for you to see that, I can go from two faces to one very easily because of that technology. All right, let's move right along. So the next thing that I want to do is talk about symmetry. So in the sculpt dialog, toolbar, you'll see that I have a couple options to create symmetry on my model. Symmetry is perfect in an example like this handle grip where it's symmetrical, right? One side probably should be exactly the same as the other, and who would want to spend an extra amount of time making a manipulation to one side and then having to try to duplicate it to the other? It's just too time consuming and not going to yield the results that you're looking for. So the way that we do that is by applying symmetry. So if I go ahead and grab mirror symmetry for my T-spline body, I can go ahead and indicate that the front side should be symmetrical with the back side. And oops, I'm going to have to actually do a quick undo here, and then we'll add that back in. Let me try that again. If I add my symmetry, there we go. You'll see that now indicated by that green line, the front edge is symmetrical with the back edge. So again, any change that I make to the front faces will propagate to the back faces as well. I can add more symmetry if I choose. Maybe I want, left and right to be symmetrical with one another. So in that example, if I were to edit this edge, you'll see all four corners should update at the same time. So again, really important when it comes to, again, modeling inside of the sculpt environment would be, making sure we apply symmetry in the instances where it makes sense. We can always remove symmetry, and you'll certainly enter into parts of your workflow where you might want to remove it based on it no longer being necessary. and you can do that through the same pull down. And then if I catch us back up to where we were, you'll see it's easy to go ahead and say clear symmetry, which will remove it by selecting the body. And again, it's just as easy to go ahead and add that symmetry back on. Okay, so while we're talking about symmetry, the next thing I want to do is use symmetry, in this case mirror symmetry, to duplicate the other half of this handle. So again, using the same workflow, I'm going to go ahead and select my T-spline body, select a plane. Again, this could be a work plane, an origin plane that you want to mirror it about. And you'll see that first, the sculpt environment did an awesome job at giving me the other half of the handle. But more importantly, if you look at the midsection here, it also healed the transition between those faces. So again, it's maintaining that curvature continuity. And again, that option is right here in the dialog box called weld. And that would give me the option to make them not continuous, right? Now these two edges are not stuck, they're not welded to one another, but in this case, that's absolutely what I want to do. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and maybe add a little bit more curvature here. Now the next thing I wanna do is spend a minute talking about different types or control that we have inside of the sculpt environment. So I'm just going to go ahead and flatten the top out here, okay? Maybe for ergonomic reasons, I want to have a nice flat part for the hand to rest on. But again, since we're in the sculpt environment, this is perfect for creating concepts. And why not go ahead and copy and paste to make a couple different examples easily accessible, so that we can look at a few different grip options or design iterations right inside of the sculpt environment. So I did that purposely so that I can show you one tool set inside of the sculpt environment called soft modification. And the way that works is you'll see if I edit that face, and I'll go ahead and pull it up 10 millimeters, you'll see that when using the edit form tool inside of the sculpt environment, my subsequent and connected faces are affected, right? That's the way that Fusion is going to go ahead and maintain curvature continuity, but I have some control over how I make those effects to my model. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and grab this edge, and I'll go ahead and pull that, maybe 20 millimeters, and you can see the difference between pulling on an edge versus a face in the way that the fall off happens across all of the adjacent faces and edges. And then I'm going to make the same edit here, and I want to show you, again, a tool over in the edit form dialog box called soft modification. And soft modification now gives us the ability to tweak and control the way that those edits are affecting the other bodies, the other faces inside of the model. So if I go ahead and pull this 20 millimeters, just like I did the other side, you can see that I have a little bit of a different fall off on those faces, and I can control that very easily by using the radius option here in Fusion. So again, I'll go ahead and pull that, and you can see some of those changes. I can also change the fall off type. So do I want that fall off to be a very distinct linear fall off, right? It's going to fall off exactly the same across the surfaces. This was the smooth option, which kind of gave me that, ramp up and ramp down. I can also do a spherical one, which you'll see, is kind of editing and pulling on that handle in a spherical nature, right? You can see that it's kind of maintaining a circular gradient in the fall off. So again, that's called soft modification, and just another great way to make sure that you're creating the right shape, the shape that you want for your designs. So now that we dove into that a little bit, I kind of like where we are so far. So now I want to go ahead and talk about how we would take this T-spline model and start to join it with the existing assembly. And one way that I might do that is by using the convert tools inside of the sculpt environment. So if I go ahead, was there a question? I guess not. I thought that might have been you, Justin. All right, great. So
nope, no questions yet.
In the modified pull down, I'm going to go ahead and use convert. And what convert allows me to do is grab a solid face, another T-spline body, or a mesh body, and bring them into my sculpt environment and turn them into a T-spline. And then I can use that to transition or to design with the bodies that I'm working on. So what I want to do is, by using the B-rep face option, which would be pulling a solid over into the sculpting environment, I'm going to go ahead and turn the top face of my slider, the bottom of my handle, how it attaches to that channel aluminum, and I'm going to convert that into a T-spline. So now you'll be able to see how I can really make that transition between my solid geometry and my T-spline geometry. So the next thing that I want to show you is one of my favorite things to do, actually, and that's the freedom of being able to just delete a face. So all they have to do is make a selection. I hit the delete key, and you'll see that Fusion not only removed those faces, but it automatically will heal the geometry. And in this case, it gives me a nice edge, which I can use to manipulate and add some information into my model. Now, I just remembered something that I forgot to show you before, and I don't want to go any further, and that is selection techniques inside of the sculpt environment. So you might have been noticing, as I was using the sculpt environment almost unconsciously, I was doing some little tips or shortcuts to make selections inside of sculpt. So what I can do is very easily, if I were to double click, right, if I click on a face, left click of course, it makes a selection on a face. If I double click, it selects an entire body, which is a great way to make sure that I can grab an entire body if I want to make an edit to it, scale it, move it, etc. Another great tip would be to select an entire edge. So you'll see, just as I mentioned, one click on an edge would give me any individual edge, but I can also double click on an edge, and now I can select an edge loop, which will give me a continuous edge loop inside of those the T-spline environment. Again, that's just a simple double click, and you'll see it'll grab an entire loop. In that case, there's not a loop, but again, this is a great tip for making selections. And the last one that I'll show you is to make a selection of continuous faces. So the way that I would do that is by clicking one face. Let's say I wanted to select this entire row of faces here. And maybe not a great example because there's only 4, not really that hard to make 4 selections. But what if that went, for 10, 20, 30 faces around a very complex object? All they have to do is make one selection, hold shift, and double click the next one, and it'll select the entire row. Again, the same way, click, shift, double click, it'll grab the entire loop, and you'll see it over here as well. Click, shift, double click, that'll grab the entire row. So again, another great way to make easy selections when you're manipulating T-splines. All right, back to the really cool stuff. So now, as I deleted those faces, you'll see Fusion healed that T-spline for me. So now I'll double click that face, and I'm going to make a couple edits to this, one of which is my favorite little hot tip that everyone should know. So first, again, if I use edit form, I can manipulate that edge, right? Pull it up. Maybe I want to add some, some shape or some puff to the bottom of my handle. But now, while in edit form, right, I'm not leaving the edit form dialog box or command. If I hold Alt and drag on the manipulator, it'll add a T-spline face. And I can just continue while holding Alt to click, drag, click, drag, click, drag, and add, in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 faces. So that's a really awesome way to be able to add geometry, add faces as you're sculpting through Fusion 360. If time allows, I'll show you another example of a T-spline body that I created where I did quite a bit of that, which hopefully will help. All right, so I'm going to make this selection. I'm going to go ahead and scale it uniformly just a little bit, so maybe it makes a better transition, something that I like. All right, and now for my favorite, the bridge command. So again, in the modify pull down, you'll see about halfway down a tool called bridge. And bridge is going to automatically create T-spline segments or faces between two edges or faces. So it is literally that simple to make this transition. All I have to do is select one edge, double click to select the other edge loop, and you'll see that Fusion is automatically making that bridge for me. And now I can go ahead and maybe define how many faces I would like in there. You'll see making it 3 gives me a little bit more control if I want to scale it. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And Fusion automatically made that transition for me. It also gave me a quick warning and told me that symmetry was removed, which certainly I can add back in this case, if I want to maintain symmetry between the front and the back of my handle. All right, so the last edits that I'll make here before we transition and try to make this a solid body is maybe I'll make a quick scale. I want to make that transition a little bit smoother. I can always grab this edge loop. Maybe I'll move it up a little bit, which will make that transition to being a smaller shape much smoother. All right, awesome. I really like this kind of shape that I made so far. And what I'm going to do now is go ahead and say finish form, which is going to put me out of the sculpt environment and back to the model environment. So now that I'm back in the model environment, let's talk about what I've created. You'll see if I look inside of the bodies folder inside of Fusion, not joints, but bodies, I have two different bodies. I have a solid. Here's that, traditional parametric solid shape that I already had created. And now I have a surface body. So that T-spline body automatically, once I finish out of the sculpt environment, becomes a NURBS surface if I don't make it, a watertight solid, in which case it would go ahead and turn it into a solid for me. But I didn't really want to spend the time to, try to make this watertight. I really want to focus on turning this with the base into one continuous solid. And the tool that I'm going to use to do that is going to be the boundary fill tool. Now, boundary fill basically looks at geometry, solids, surfaces, work planes, and tries to find a watertight solid. And then it'll turn that solid, it'll turn that watertight void into a solid body. And I'll show you how that works. So if I use boundary fill, now all I have to do is make my selections. I have a solid body, I have a surface body, and I'm going to use this work plane that cuts right through the middle of my open surface, which will go ahead and find that right there is a watertight solid. Now I have the option to go ahead and pick the watertight selections that, that Fusion found, say OK, and it'll turn that automatically. I'll turn off my other objects into one continuous solid. This is a really awesome workflow when it comes to, again, transitioning from surface bodies into solids. Again, you'll see if I cut through that, here's a continuous solid shape that I was able to create using T-splines. The last two things that I'll do is maybe mirror this shape. I want to mirror it about the middle, and I'll go ahead and do a combine to do a quick Boolean join and turn that into one continuous surface body. All right, so it's about 40 minutes past the hour, and I'm going to pause there and, again, open up the webinar for any questions. Justin, I don't know if any have come in that you want me to touch on quickly. If not, I'll also jump over and talk through another quick example.
It's actually been a little bit quiet on the question side. So we just had the one that came through earlier. Yeah, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box there, and Jamie can answer it for you.
All right, so if there's no questions at the moment, I also want to show you, if you look at the in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel, there's a little Word document which has a link in it that will automatically download and open this quick example so that you can try the bridge command if it's something you've never tried before. So if you just go ahead and hit that open example in Fusion, again, hopefully you're sitting somewhere, or you will be later, in front of Fusion 360. That'll go ahead and download and open the Ember handle right about where I did the bridge before. So again, if you want to try that out, please give it a shot. You feel free to try it now, or as soon as we're done with the webinar. It's a lot of fun to work with this cool bridge command as well as the sculpt environment. So you should be able to just edit the form, and then just as I showed you, go ahead and try out bridge by selecting your two edges, and have fun sculpting. So happy T-Splines to everybody. And again, hopefully you can download that, pull it right from the handout section.
So it looks like we got a couple questions that came through, or we got a question that came through. Let's see here. Do you have another? You said you had another example you were going to kind of show here. Why don't we go through that and see if this answers that?
Okay, perfect. So this is another quick. Well, this one's not a quick example, but I wanted to hopefully again show a little bit more of a complex or a more complex example, and talk a bit about some of the techniques that I use to sculpt this body. So again, this is a reciprocating saw that you'll see inside of Fusion, and the basis for the outer housing of this model was a T-spline body. So if I jump back in the timeline, all the way back to that form, again, I can jump back in time and now edit the original T-spline shape. So you'll see here's that T-spline that was created. In this case, it was created with open end and an open bottom, which I used the patch environment to create some quick surfaces and then turn it into a solid later. But what I wanted to do was just show you quickly some of the techniques that I used to create primarily this area of the model, right? Basically the handle into the flat part of my saw where you see the vents right there. So again, I'm going to grab this T-spline body. We're going to move it out of the way and just make some quick changes here so that we have a little bit of a better palette to work in. So, all right, now that I have, again, just something to sculpt around, and again, this might be, this could be an image like I showed you before, but in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use, the old body as a sculptural shape. But in this case, what I want to do is start off with a face. So rather than starting with a primitive, right, which is a great workflow depending on, the results that I'm looking for, I'm going to simply go ahead and just start with one, simple face, which I'll continue to kind of sculpt and add in the geometry that I'm looking for. So again, I just went in there and created a T-spline face. Again, I'll move it maybe closer to location. And now I'm going to use that face to continue to add all of the surrounding geometry. So using the technique that I showed you before, if I were to click on this edge, use Edit Form, and while holding the Alt modifier, I'm going to go ahead and add faces. So you'll see as I hold Alt, I can click and drag, and continue to add more and more geometry into my model. So here's a pretty quick and easy way that I went ahead and created some of my faces. Maybe I want to edit this, make this a little bit tighter, make that transition a little bit smaller. And the next thing that I want to do is start to add some geometry to the bottom. So first I'll go ahead and grab this edge. Maybe I'll move it up a little bit. And again, while double clicking to select the entire edge, I'm going to hold Alt and add the transition. And I'm also going to prep this face over here to make my transition into the handle. So you'll see I just kind of moved the vertice over towards the middle of my part so that I can now start to make my handle and then the transition between the two. All right, so we've got about hopefully 10 minutes left. Now let's talk about making the handle and then the transition. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a cylinder just as we did before. This seems like a perfect use case to create a cylinder. So I'll go ahead and create a shape. I'll drag it out any distance for the moment, and then I'll use just the Edit Form button to move this into an appropriate location. you can see I was a little bit off in the size of my handle there. No problem. I can very easily resize that by using the scale modifier. All right. Now the last thing that I want to do, again, after maybe moving this over just a hair into location, and I'm also going to delete. I'm going a little bit fast, and I apologize, but I want to be able to hopefully show you guys how to make this transition. I'm going to go ahead and delete the side of this T-spline. Windows Select probably would have been a great option, but again, I'm working with half. I'll mirror it later, so I'm going to go ahead and grab that handle or grab that half cylinder for now. All right, so now what I'm going to do is, again, grab these two bottom faces down here, and using really the same, one or two techniques that I talked about earlier, I'm going to go ahead and do an edit form, add a face. Again, you'll see that those faces are coming out for me a little bit, not in the right location, but it's easy for me to grab edges, faces, and vertices to, start to make that transition easier. Maybe I will, again, grab this edge, move it back a little bit to a position that looks close. I'm also going to grab this edge. And the last thing I want to do is subdivide this face so that I have, two faces that are going to merge into two faces over here. Let me grab a drink of water. All right, here we go. So the way that I want to do that is using Insert Edge. I showed you where that was before, but I also wanted to show you a quick hot tip in Fusion, and that's using the S key. So if you press S, shortcut key inside of Fusion, that will, based on the environment that you're in, give you a command prompt to find a tool. So if I was looking for Insert Edge, I can type it in and find it. And any tool that I like, that I use often, I can go ahead and add it to my toolbox. So again, as I get really comfortable and I start using these tools, I press the S key, I grab Insert Edge, and it's always there ready for me to be used. All right, so now that I made that transition, I'm going to go ahead and, again, use the Bridge tool. Grab, oops, let me try that again. I'm going to go ahead and grab Bridge and bridge these 1-2 faces into these 1-2 faces. And I'll do that with, kind of one transition between the two and say OK. And now I've started to make that transition between my two bodies. So now, again, I really haven't used any other tools than we've talked about so far, but just kind of putting those techniques together, it becomes a lot easier for me to, start to match and manipulate this shape. So again, edit form, I'm going to pull this down a little bit, and then maybe what I want to do is grab my entire edge loop. Again, while holding Alt, I'm going to go ahead and drag in another body here for the transition, or I should say another set of faces for the transition. And again, I'll just grab and sculpt on some of these vertices to make them better match the shape that I was looking for. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left, and I can continue to kind of sculpt and tweak and work on this literally all day if I feel like it, but I also wanted to pause and open it back up. Justin, you said there was a question that maybe, hopefully, I captured in that little segment, but again, I'm going to turn it back over to the group and see if there's anything else I can help with.
Yeah, it looks like no other questions have come up, and I've answered some of the other ones that have come across. So I'll give, we got last, kind of 10 minutes here. If there's anything else that's specific you want to see, we are here and available.
Yeah, and if not, there's a couple more tools that I can show that we haven't touched on yet, but I just want to make sure that we capture everything and anything that that the group is looking for.
Yeah, and I'll mention this as well. I am recording the webinar as well, and the files are available in the handout. So if you want to run through this stuff again on your own, or you want to pass it off to a colleague, you'll be able to. I'll be sharing out the recording probably later today, if not first thing in the morning, if for some reason it takes a while to get it encoded. So.
All right. So last little transition I'll make here. Doesn't sound like we have any specific requests or questions. So again, I'll just come in here, make a transition, which actually jumped me right into one of the things that I wanted to show you guys. So two last little tools that I'll show you quickly. People often ask, what if I want a hard edge, a theoretical sharp, or if there's a feature line that I want to accentuate or maintain as a sharp. Very simple way to do it, pretty obvious command, but if you pull down underneath modify, you can crease any edge. So maybe the example is in here, I want this to be a hard edge. I want this to be a sharp that runs down the side of my shape. And now you'll see it automatically removed that transition, the curvature transition between the two, and gave me a sharp, which I can now, again, continue to modify using the edit form and the T-spline tools. Another really handy tool set is, or I should say, kind of sculpting mode. If you look under performance, there's a couple different display modes that are available. So I've been working the whole time in smooth mode. Smooth mode is Alt-3 as a hotkey, but box mode, which is Alt-1, is a great way to also sculpt. Now, you might look at this and, of course, smooth mode looks fantastic and beautiful, but this is a really awesome way to work inside of the sculpt environment and have a better idea, once we flatten out these faces, how my transitions are, how my, my network of faces are kind of flowing from one to another. Do I have any points where, maybe like right here as an example, I have kind of an exaggerated sharp. Maybe I want to flare that in a little better. So again, this is a great way to transition. Simple hotkeys is Alt-1 and Alt-3 to jump back and forth between the two options. All right, there's one or two more quick ones that I'll share with the group. Again, since it doesn't seem like there's any other questions, I'm just going to add maybe some more faces here as we start to make that turn, and I'll say okay. So another really helpful tool, which again, great to know is there, is the freeze command. Now, freeze does exactly what hopefully you think it does. It freezes geometry. It makes sure that, hey, if I really like the way that this transition is, for example, or maybe part of my handle is a better example. I don't want this face to move anymore. I can go ahead and freeze it. And then something happens. You'll notice that when I select and make that face frozen, I'll say okay, it's highlighted by kind of a brighter, bolder edge, which means that edge is frozen. And then all of the edges that touch it, right, going back to what we talked about before, all of the edges that touch it are what I'll call half frozen. And the reason being is these edges, these faces can be manipulated by editing another face. So the example would be, if I were to pull on this face, this edge, or this face can be manipulated, but I can't manipulate this face directly because moving that face would make edits to the frozen face. So again, keep that in mind. It's a really nice way to preserve certain areas once maybe you get them how you want. You don't want to accidentally or manipulate them without realizing it. All right, we got about 6 minutes left. Quick time check. Again, I'm going to turn it over to the meeting, and Justin, you as well, if there was anything else that you'd like me to cover. Again, otherwise, I can show off a couple more tool tips, or we can always give everyone back a few minutes in their day.
Well, no other questions. There were a couple came in that I was able to answer with the chat, so I think we're good.
Great.
I think we could probably wrap it up. We're about at the top of the hour, so give the people the last couple minutes back to their day. And guys, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out over email. You guys have got our email address as part of the webinar, so feel free to reply there. Or head to the forums. There's always people there to answer your question. We try to answer stuff as fast as we can. And other than that, thanks guys for joining the webinar. Feel free to join some of the other ones we've got. They're all on the calendar on the Fusion website. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, guys. Hope to see you soon.